Alright, today we watched The Green Knight. So, Aiden, what is the plot of The Green Knight?
Okay, so The Green Knight is a bit of an experimental film. There's a knight named Gawain. I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced. It's based on a poem from the 1400s. On Christmas Day, a Green Knight comes, the titular Green Knight, and asks to play a game where someone is to strike him with a sword, and in 1 year he will strike them back in the same way. And Gawain has to go on an adventure a year after the Christmas game to face his half of the game, so to say. There's a lot that happens between that, but Connor, what'd you think of The Green Knight?
Thought it was a really good movie. The Green Knight is very much more of a fairy tale movie than you might expect from the poster. The poster kind of makes it seem like some gladiatorial epic with some guy holding up a battle axe. It's not really the case. The movie is pretty slow paced. It kind of lives in a fantasy world, a la Lord of the Rings. Not really the same, very different fantasy world, but you know, that type of medieval fantasy, castles and the like. And it's just kind of the story of this character's adventure, kind of trying to grapple with the consequences of his actions, trying to work through...
Trying to grow up, essentially.
Trying to grow up, learning about if it's worth... If his quest really is worth doing in the quest, in the, I guess, goal for honor. And it's just a really interesting kind of coming-of-age style story. The shot composition throughout is very slow and deliberate, but also very beautiful. And I think, despite our main character being of few words, he has a lot of depth to him and kind of what the story's trying to say and figure out with our character, I find to be quite interesting. So, I thought the movie was quite good. And, yeah, I think it's a relatable story to just kind of people trying to find who they are and grappling with expectations versus what is probably more realistic of them. So it definitely isn't the epic war movie it might appear from the outside, but it's still kind of an interesting little adventure coming-of-age story set in a unique time period that I think they did a really good job of capturing. So Aiden, what did you think of The Green Knight?
The Green Knight is visually very fantastic. There's lots of things that have stuck with me since the first time I watched it and rewatched the back half of the scene in the forest where he's tied up and the camera spins around a few times and he's a skeleton, and then it spins back, but it takes a shorter path back, and after he meets the giants, the twist upside down, and there's lots of great visual things, as well as lots of unspoken metaphor. A lot of things in the movie can be interpreted as standing for other things. The most apparent, when he first leaves, his cloak is a very golden yellow, and by the end it's become more brown as he's slowly been worn down by the things he's seen and done. There's other things, lots of things to interpret in it. Both his first girlfriend, the prostitute, and a woman he meets later, played by the same actress, There are some metaphors that are a little more clear than others. The green belt, green sash that he wears seems to mainly be a metaphor for holding on to fear. So there's a lot of interesting things to go into. Obviously, this is not a general audience movie. It's a very artistic film.
Yeah, I mean, you could put up the Rotten Tomatoes score here, and the
Compared
critic
to the user
consensus is pretty good, and then the user score is fucking terrible.
Yeah. That said, I really enjoyed it. I've thought about it a lot since I saw it. Visually fantastic, very interesting to think about. Pretty much the only thing I can say, some of the CGI is pretty crusty. I think the fox usually looks good, but there's a few times where the fox looks pretty rough and the giants look weird. But it's a low budget thing, so I'm not gonna knock it too hard for that. But
I don't know what budget it had, but considering it was an A24 project, I think it overall holds up really well in terms of visuals. Granted, there are some issues with the crusty CGI.
I mean, visually it's fantastic. It's just the CGI is glaring in a few spots that pulls you out of it a little. But
it doesn't bother me
despite
as much
that,
with more independent projects like this, or not that A24 is necessarily independent, but smaller studio projects.
Regardless of that, I think The Green Knight is fantastic. So yeah, I don't think I want to go any further into it than that.
I do want to point out that, actually, you know what, I think you're right. Let's just leave it at that. That sounds good.
Okay. Would you recommend The Green Knight?
I definitely would. If you're looking, I know some of our audience is more into like action movies and superhero movies and stuff. If that's your thing, more action-oriented films, this isn't going to be some sort of like Lord of the Rings style like action fantasy epic. This is much more of like a Brothers Grimsby fairy tale. It's very, it relies more on visuals and metaphor than you would necessarily get from something like a more standard epic. This film never actually relies on action.
No, it has no action. There's one action scene, like 5 minutes in. It's not very actiony.
Hard pressed to call that an action scene. But yeah, I mean, it is something where general audiences are gonna see the poster and the trailer and say, "This looks bad fucking ass," but it's not necessarily what it is.
Yeah,
it seems like an impossible film to advertise accurately.
Oh my God,
so if our review is any sort of endorsement, I say if you're interested into more artistic filmmaking that's slow paced and is more about visuals and metaphor than necessarily like overt action and stuff like it may appear from the outset, I would say give it a try. If you're looking for something more action-oriented, I would stick with your Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, because this is certainly not something in that realm of fantasy. So, Aiden, would you recommend The Green Knight?
I'm gonna go with a broad yes, actually, without too many caveats. I mean, obviously, if you're into the art of filmmaking, you've probably already seen this because it's a fucking A24 movie.
Yeah, you probably wore your A24 fucking beanie to the...
I think that the movie is accessible enough that someone who goes into it knowing what it is will probably be able to use it as an entryway into more artistic aspects of filmmaking. That said, I don't think everyone is going to like it, but I would definitely recommend giving it a try regardless.
I would disagree on using this as an entryway.
You don't think?
I think it's something people could latch on to, but I feel like you could easily get the wrong idea about something like this. If you want to go into a good entryway is something like a Stanley Kubrick, where like it hits you over the head a little bit more. Start with Full Metal Jacket, work your way back in Stanley Kubrick or like even Akira Kurosawa's filmographies, and then Green Knight, and the rest of your A24 shit comes next. If you have an A24 beanie just to look like a fucking hipster, but you haven't seen any of their movies, maybe it would be a good entryway for you to give it a shot. I'm just giving you guys shit.